Hello and welcome to the Internet of Things Made Simple. I'm Larry Bohumer. This is mini episode number 14. Thanks for joining us. As always, shout out to our new listeners. Welcome aboard. Check out our webpage, theinternetofThingsMadeSimple.com. Go figure. And as always, I humbly ask, subscribe to this podcast using your favorite podcast service. And I think we're on a couple dozen, so you got plenty to choose from. In this mini episode, we're going to be covering some recent predictions that have been done about the IoT industry. Some of them are quite right on, I think. Other ones might make you shake your head just a little bit. But to start, I wanted to cover a recent acquisition that might not have made the headlines as much as it probably should have. A few weeks ago, it snuck under the radar that Microsoft had acquired ExpressLogic, which is a software company based out of San Diego. Don't worry if you haven't heard of them. I hadn't heard of them either. Now, it's very well known that Microsoft has jumped in with both feet into the IoT space. I guess a $5 billion announced investment in IoT might just indicate that. There were some questions as to what they were up to with this acquisition, and I had some myself. Now, I'm going to walk through the acquisition here. The first part, which explains what ExpressLogic does, was explained beautifully in a Forbes article. I'm going to use that as a guideline here, so I do thank them for this. The main product from ExpressLogic is referred to as an RTOS, or real-time operating system. I was kind of shocked to hear that their RTOS is deployed in over 6 billion devices. It's not the same as like a Mac OS or Windows or Linux or anything like that, as it's kind of modified for a particular device. I don't get too nerdy here. Its freakishly small footprint allows this OS to be used on microcontrollers, as an example. Think lower cost items where you would put an OS on. It apparently works very well on platforms like Texas Instruments, ARM, and Intel. It's even been used by NASA. This sounds great, but that still doesn't explain why Microsoft bought them. So I'm going to try to put my 2 cents in here. There's always been a barrier to entry for IoT. First we had cell modules, which have a relatively high cost for many applications. Not for a car, for instance, but for an appliance for your home, it never came close to making sense. You also had local area modules, Wi-Fi and Bluetooth. In many cases, IoT still didn't make financial sense to deploy them in those products. This next part has to do with the design of devices. Many devices we use were designed to do one function. They weren't designed with IoT or any kind of connectivity in mind. So it's much more complex for them than just to add a cell module or a Wi-Fi module. The manufacturer also needed help on how to make the move towards connected devices in general. ThreadX, which is the name of the OS from ExpressLogic, not only provides a great platform for devices, it simplifies connectivity to the cloud. Think of it as a complete turnkey solution for companies that want to jump both feet into the world of smart devices. When you combine what they offer with what Microsoft has been offering, like their Azure IoT platform, it doesn't take much of a leap to see how these two would fit together. And it does bring up an interesting point. Microsoft launched a somewhat similar product called Sphere a little while back. Do they drop this? Wasn't part of the announcement, so I really don't know, but I guess time will tell. Overall, I have to say I didn't understand the purchase at first, but when I started to read through it and I've done a bit more research on it, it does make a lot of sense. It doesn't mean it's going to work. It just means that it's probably an educated investment for Microsoft to make. After a short break, let's jump right into some interesting IoT predictions. Back in a few seconds. And welcome back. So the first prediction I'll just jump right into is by 2025, there will be 21 billion IoT devices. There are probably about as many predictions as to how many IoT devices there will be by a certain date as there are actual devices themselves that will be deployed by that date. In all seriousness, everyone has their own prediction, and if you spin it the right way by defining IoT the way you want it to, every one of us can be right. I think it's the same mentality that keeps most economic forecasters employed. You can always spin it to make it sound like you were right. One recent number, which I'll harp on, says that there'll be 21 billion, which is more than 2 per person on Earth in just 6 short years. Like all of these predictions, the devil is in the details. If an iPad or a tablet is used to communicate with sensors, does that fall under IoT? How about a cellular gateway that's simply used to replace an existing landline connection? Do you count every single sensor in a factory, meaning that a single building could have hundreds of thousands of devices deployed? Or do you only count the gateway that all the devices connect through? Either way, I guess the message is that IoT is growing quite fast, and it's not going to be slowing down anytime soon. I'll let you pick the actual number that meets your wish for a forecast. On to point number 2. IoT will hit 100% adoption rate by 2030. First, there's an interesting point here, in that it's expected that 100% of the global population is supposed to have access to some sort of long-range IoT-based network in the next 5 years. And the addition of lower-cost solar panels, combined with low battery use of many devices, may help to overcome financial obstacles to deploy these things in third-world countries as well. So does that mean every home or person will have some sort of smart device? Well, again, I guess it depends on how you define a smart device. If I had a solar-powered icebox that's often used in many developing countries in place of a refrigerator that can indicate with an LED that the temperature is too high, does that count as an IoT device, even though the person might not access it via their smartphone? I did mention as well about low-cost solar panels becoming more common in the developing world. And I think you're going to see a lot of IoT deployed in those places for things like water levels and purity monitors, as well as for agricultural use. On to prediction number 3. The value of IoT technology will hit $6.2 trillion in 6 years, or 2025. These predictions are just about as wildly speculative, and I guess tough to be wrong on, as predicting the number of devices. How do you count the value of IoT? Do you use the amount of savings that a solution would bring? How about productivity gains? Maybe the cost of the solution themselves? I guess the answer is yes to all 3, depending on what number you want to come to. Regardless of how you value IoT technology, the important part here is that there is value, as you're going to see from the next point. And IoT is becoming an important part of all aspects of our life. The other thing to consider is that we're seeing less Internet of Poop solutions. You might have remember a podcast I did where I talked about the Twitter page, the Internet of Bleep, I'll just use poop, and about how bad some solutions were and useless they were. We're seeing less and less of those, and much more IoT solutions coming to market are actually quite useful. The fourth point is not really a prediction, it's more of a survey. 94% of all IoT implementers have seen a return on their investment. As hinted in the last point, most people who choose a smart product are seeing some sort of return. To me, the return is based on how much more the smart version costs when compared to the non-smart version, and is that extra cost justified? So imagine you need to get a new garage door opener, and you see that the smart garage door opener costs $100 more than the not smart one or not connected one. The value for IoT wouldn't so much be in the overall cost of the product. You were going to replace it anyways, but rather in the delta between the smart and non-smart version. So it appears that most people see a reason to upgrade or justify the higher cost. And that's good. It means that we all have some jobs, I guess, going forward. On to point number 5, and this one was kind of confusing to me in that it says 90% of all cars will be connected by 2020. I didn't understand it because cars have been using embedded cellular technology inside of them for at least 15 years, if not more, depending on the brand. I would have thought we'd have passed over that threshold a while ago. I guess the only way you can come to the conclusion about that kind of a number is if you only count connected cars that the consumer themselves can connect to via some sort of smartphone or tablet app. As pointed out in my book, some cars, namely Teslas, but I heard Hyundai is doing it as well, have gone past the point of allowing the user to connect to the device with their smartphone, and in fact are using a smartphone as the main method of entering the car or locking the car. This brings up some huge security issues in my mind, and I'm not sure we fully thought it through. You know, a lot of consumers don't use great passwords on their phones. Now, if you get a hold of my phone, you can break in and get my car. Stay tuned to see how this works out. I just don't see it working out well. Number 6 has to do with smart clothing. And the overall market for smart clothing is expected to see a 71% annual growth rate over the next 5 years. This I can see quite easily, actually. Many early adopters started using smart clothing for different activities, like the triathlon sports, running, cycling, and swimming. It's also made its way into areas like the military and first responders, as it allows the leaders to get a better understanding of how the soldier or officer or firefighter are doing and to see how they best handle the rigors of their job. Definitely will grow in many industrial areas. Construction and energy production are already starting to dabble into smart clothing, as well as those who work in extremely remote areas. Think northern Canada or the deserts of Arizona. And as costs continue to fall, it's going to make its way into all of our products. Making myself a bit of a dinosaur here. At one point, we used to differentiate cellular phones as phones or smartphones. Now, pretty much every phone is smart. You don't say, I have a smartphone, you say, grab me my phone. That's going to be the same way for shoes and jackets at one point, if you can believe it or not. The final one, number 7, again, it's not a prediction, it's a survey. And it's a bit of an old one, but it's still relevant because even back then, the number was kind of shocking. And that was 87% of consumers about 4 to 5 years ago were not aware of the term IoT or Internet of Things or anything about this space. And as I mentioned, it's 4 or 5 years old. I'm quite certain the percentage is much, much lower. I couldn't find a more accurate number though. Remember though, 4 or 5 years ago, a lot of businesses and some consumers had started to move towards IoT. Like I'm sure a lot of people had smart electric meters as an example in their home at that time. So it was a bit surprising to me to see the number that low even then. So if you have a better number as to what the recognition is for IoT, please drop me a note on that. I definitely would want to see it. Thanks again for listening to this short mini episode. As mentioned, I want to hear from you both about that updated number as well as anything else that you may want to talk about. The best way to start is our Facebook page, The Internet of Things Made Simple. We have some great links to previous material like podcasts as well as blogs, ebooks, you name it. If we're connected on LinkedIn, that's a good place to start. Drop me a note, or I guess it would be a message. And if we're personally connected, send me an email or text. I don't respond to my phone as much as I used to, so start with an email or text. Thanks again. I'm Larry by Humor. Take care.